In case the title of this video isn't obvious, this one goes out to ShoeOnHead, because someone in my comment section said a while back that Shoe had some other live stream on Instagram where she said I was one of her favorite right-wing content creators. Naturally, seeing as I can't verify this, my immediate thought was, Shoe has over 2 million subs, what the hell is she doing watching me? That's bollocks. But a while ago, I was in Adam and Stitch's chat. Shoe came in, I said hi, and she said, oh hello, my favorite spoon on YouTube. And I went, wait, you know who I am? She said, yeah, I watch all your shit. And I thought, oh, that comment was probably true then. In which case, hi Shoe, how you doing there? So people were joking, Spoon, you were Bernie bro, now you're an absolute monarchist. You have to save her. Save her? What am I, the monarchical whisper up in this joint? Is it my job to make women more base now, is it? Actually, that's not a bad gig to have. All joking aside though, the Bernie bro angle is quite interesting. If you do any political content and you go from one side to the other, you cannot escape the label of grifter. You will either learn and shift, in which case you're a grifter, or you don't and you look stupid in perpetuity. What great options you have. In fairness though, this is also contingent on the politics of the person watching the creators, as well as how long they've been watching. There will be those that follow the content creators no matter what their position, those that think it's taken them far too long to wake up, in which case they're kind of slow, or ruthlessly principled to the point of being crippled by reality, etc. You don't know how all this goes by now. Whereas myself, I became right-wing before I did any content. I went way the hell outside the mainstream right. I am largely immune then from the usual labels, and as such, my journey is met with intrigue rather than skepticism. Woo! So how did all that happen? Well, pull up a chair, maybe get a drink. I recall the lady who first got me into politics back in the early 2010s was a Californian named Danny. It's funny looking back at it now, one would hardly think someone like her could actually exist. She was quite a lefty, had the short hairstyle of your average Lardwell feminist type, even though she wasn't overweight at all, and she was a vicious troll. If people had heard her language now, she would undoubtedly be depicted in an SS uniform and called a Nazi. She was not shy with the slurs at all. But if you're young and in the political wilderness, the left does have a certain kind of appeal to the youth, at least during that period. Now, not so much. I wonder why. Bernie did have a platform in the 2016 cycle, though, where he appeared authentic, and given that politics is fake and gay, appearing authentic does go a long way. I do distinctly remember, though, Bernie's first misstep, when he said white people don't know what it's like to be poor. Being a South African, any discussion of race is where we tend to make most people look rather tame by comparison. The pandering did not sit well with me at all, not to mention mathematically, that sentence never even made any sense. That moment fractured my head and kickstarted the red pill that lay dormant into blooming. When it was Hillary versus the Don, I wanted Trump to win because I considered Clinton to be a cold-blooded psychopath. I still do. When he won, I thought, oh sweet, this is gonna be hilarious. Now let the man govern, let's see how he does. If he does well, he will be re-elected. If he doesn't, well, so the cycle goes on. I was very naive at the time. And then the whole Russia thing kicked off, and man, did that make me realize just how unbelievably stupid people really are. I was not exactly politically astute at the time by any means, but even I could draw the parallels between the Bush-era Iraq war gimmick with the Clinton ground troops in Syria nonsense before the election, but that's a whole nother story. All I saw was the machinery do everything in its power to convince the masses the current administration was a dysfunctional clown show, ironically also destroying their credibility in the process. It was surreal, very childish and very stupid, as if all the adults just vanished. There was no discussion anywhere about policies. At least not in the mainstream, anyway. Now, this is just from my perspective. I am under the impression that what drew people to Bernie, and left-wing politics in general, is a genuine feeling of great mistrust towards the ruling class. But I would say where you go from this realization determines if you're stuck in the left or you can go base and acknowledge the harsh realities of the real world. Those who are naive and ignorant, motivated by envy and hatred, will stew in the boiling pot of leftism and are destined to remain politically childlike forever. The reason I say this is because the same class of people who whine and complain and bitch will follow those in power like sheep and obey the most deranged and delusional trends that serve absolutely no functional purposes outside of appearing virtuous for social trends. There is not a single policy that the leftist believes in that doesn't involve granting more power to the state. These lemmings, for some bizarre reason, believe that politicians will abide by their morality, even as everything they believe in is dictated to them top-down style, because that's how they believe politicians should behave. And at no point is there any examination as to why this never comes to fruition. The very same people who complain about corruption non-stop never see the corruption of their own ilk and blindly believe utopia can be achieved if only they just wish hard enough. There is nothing beyond their stupid childlike notion of, but this is how it should be. No examination as to the structures, the incentives, or drives of human nature and power whatsoever. To be a leftist is to be a delusional imbecile. Take, for example, the concept of checks and balances, which if you take a few moments to examine in earnest, you will realize is a crock of BS. Governments are always made up of people who have their own flaws and desires. If your checks and balances are maintained by human beings, you will always rely on the honorable and the duty-bound folk to keep it as such. If, however, your system does not reward these types, your system is destined to attract the worst sort of people imaginable. Constitutions are nothing more than guidelines, people, and without an umpire, they will forever remain mere guidelines, as you constantly shove in more and more naive and amateur actors into a vast network of entrenched bureaucratic ticks. And once you really click this, you will realize all leftists are nothing more than drug addicts wanting a high that simply doesn't exist. At which point all leftists become jokes, and the more left they swim, the more they look like they belong in daycare or a mental asylum. I myself, during the early Trump years, was watching a lot of the Lotus Eaters when they were just getting started, which was all well and good, but I couldn't help but shake this feeling that something was, off. I'm getting information, but it's not exactly making me more intelligent, just knowledgeable. But the knowledge is capped at a certain ceiling level. Kind of like learning multiplications over and over again. Yes, you can riff them off well enough, but there is a well beyond mere multiplication. There were things about the system that even then I could tell were misfiring. Like, why is democracy good but politics is bad? Why do we like democracy, but politicians are renowned as the most dishonest people next to lawyers? Why do we claim to like our system of government, yet we hate everyone in it? None of this makes any kind of sense. I was never exactly invested in the democratic model, but it was all that I knew, so my mind had a vast question mark of unmarked territory that was open to answers, because it's become overwhelmingly obvious the current system does not work, at least for the average person anyway. Merchant class a different story, and it just so happens that Sargon mentioned something called The Cathedral by someone named Mencius Mollberg, and I thought, that sounds interesting. And he wrote a series of books on his old website, Unqualified Reservations, one of them being an open letter to open-minded progressives. It's been several years since I had anything to do with progressivism, but nevertheless I decided to check it out. And that book ended up being my gateway drug into the world of monarchy. You learn old-world concepts, the thinking of previous centuries, ancient values, before the democratic revolution. The best thing that you can get from reading older works is to see minds outside of the current mode. Minds bereft of the incompetence of modern-day corruption, and my word, that is rather sobering. If you want to go from curious normally to, oh dear lord, I can't unsee this now, the 5 books I would recommend for that, in conjunction with Mollberg's book of course. Politics by Aristotle, Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes, Democracy, the God That Failed by Hans Hermann Hoppe, Liberty or Equality, The Challenge of Our Time by Erich von Korner-Ledin, and On Power by Bertrand de Chauvenel. Those are some good ones to get you started. Then you get into the heavier stuff. Maybe some Robert Filmer, some Joseph de Maistre, Carl Schmitt, Julius Evola, Jacques Ellul, Robert Higgs, James Burnham, etc., etc. The biggest hurdle for getting people off the democratic drug is getting them to realize their vote and influence is an illusion. They have power quite literally only on paper. That's a tough pill to choke down, as sobriety often is. Cheers for watching, and once again, I apologize for nothing.